Upgrades.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another JVS movie review. Today we have the sequel to one of the best horror movies in the last couple of years, and this is Black Phone 2. Here's a quick synopsis. In 1982, 4 years after the events of the first film, Flannery Blake is trying to deal with the trauma from his kidnapping by and killing of the grabber. Meanwhile, his psychic sister Gwen starts having terrifying visions of mutilated children and nightmares with a phone ringing, and is directed by Scott Derrickson, and it stars Mason Thames, Madeleine McGraw, and Ethan Hawke. The first thing to say is, if you remember the first Black Phone, it was more of a cerebral film. The grabber, played by Ethan Hawke, as he's just coming in and snatching up kids and snatching up and killing people. Like, that was more of a realistic horror film. The approach for part 2, very shockingly, was to go more of a supernatural angle. Because if you saw part 1, you were really questioning how could you possibly pull off a sequel to this film. And here, I would say that Scott took inspiration from Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors. So I'm going specifically to Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors, as this film feels like a cousin of that film here. As we open up in the film and we get to see how much Flannery is suffering from just the trauma of his experience, and we see him doing drugs, we see him being extremely violent, and at the same time we get reintroduced to Gwen, who's having these nightmarish visions and dreams of not just a grabber, but just of these kids in a lake, and she can't figure out what's going on, and it's causing her to sleepwalk. One of the most interesting parts of when we get to see Gwen in these dreams, in this other cerebral world that she's in, we get a completely different camera focus that is fantastically done. It is one of the best usages of a different form of camera in a film that I've ever seen, where you immediately understand that you're in a dream world rather than a real world when this angle comes on. And then we get to see Gwen suffer through these dreams, as these dreams are trying to point out things to her. That's where it is almost identical to Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors, as she is playing Patricia Arquette to a T in these scenes here. And while it's hard to take on a film, and Dream Warriors, for people that don't know, is a classic horror film to me. So to take on that type of film and to completely switch what Black Phone is for a sequel and to go into the realm of the supernatural, you have to give them credit for finding an interesting way to build a sequel. And for this film, it is very slow moving. Even though we get these dreams, we get these terrifying visions that she's going through. We see Flannery as he's avoiding answering the phone because he's getting calls from the grabber on the phone and other people asking for help. And he just is refusing to answer these phones that have to deal with his own trauma. All of that building up as we get to the real crux of the story about them getting to this cabin and getting to relive certain moments from their past, as a lot of things come back into play again. It is very slow moving. That first 40 minutes of this film feels like you're in there for about an hour and 20 minutes. It drags on so long before we get to what makes this story interesting, that for a lot of people, I think it can be a turnoff because it's so slow building. Luckily, it's still directed well and it's still acted well, even though it's slow building. But I understand that it has dead spots in the beginning that can take an audience out of it. Luckily, what you're here for are the performances. Madeleine and Mason do a great job as brother and sister in this film here. That's what you're here for. Granted, Ethan Hawke is the grabber. He's behind a mask for all of the movie, technically. So it's not the same Ethan Hawke that you got for Black Phone 1. It's not necessarily the creepiness of it, because, again, this is a more supernatural version of the Grabber than it was in part one. So then you have to take into account those elements for what you're getting out of Ethan in this film. It is a very much a supporting role that he's doing here. Granted, we do get backstory on the Grabber, and that's, again, one of the saving graces of this film is that it fully fleshes out not only the Grabber story, but this family story. And that's what's keeping you interested. Even when everything is slow moving, it's so much that's unlocked and so much I will not tell you because you need to see this film, to me, to really appreciate exactly what Scott's doing here and the way things unfold. And I think that is the most interesting part. That's the part that's going to grab the audiences the most, is that unfolding element of it. Granted, it is extremely slow moving. By the time you get to the second and third act, though, this becomes a very fast paced, very hard hitting type of film. I'm not going to say fully horror. It still feels more in the line of a thriller. Granted, it's a thriller if it was based off of a Nightmare on Elm Street film here, but it doesn't unnecessarily amp up the gore level. It does attempt to amp up the suspense. Unfortunately, some of the suspense just comes across as a little too weak to really make you feel what the Grabber's doing here. But just the element of the story keeps you so intrigued because you get to experience backstories of the Grabber, backstories of the family, and an array of different characters that are involved in this film here that really keep you intrigued throughout. As it pertains to the direction and cinematography, again, Scott does a great job. I think this is his best wheelhouse to me from him being a director, is in the horror genre here. He understands how to properly build up a character. He understands the way to build up a storyline. Granted, this film, in all honesty, lacks a lot of the suspense that you got from Black Phone 1. But again, he took risks to me with this film because this was a huge risk to take a film like Black Phone and turn it into a completely different supernatural type of sequel to it. I've never seen this done, and I would tell most directors I would think for most directors it would be a horrible idea to even attempt this. But he still manages to nail it. Why it's not remotely close to the film that the first Black Phone is, and it's nowhere near the film that Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors is, the film that I think it borrows the most from. But it is still a decent entry into the horror genre for this year, and definitely a worthy successor to Black Phone. While granted, it's not onto the level of Black Phone 1. But Black Phone 2, which drops this Friday in theaters, out of a possible 10, I'm going to give Black Phone 2 a 7 out of 10. This is a solid late October horror movie to go and see. Granted, again, it's going to be slow building, but if you just appreciate the filmmaking process, I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy this film because this film is beautiful on so many different levels. Again, when we get with Gwen and we get out of the reality real world into the dream world, to me, that is some of the best you will see here. And again, it is hard for anybody to take on any form of comparison to a Nightmare on Elm Street film, especially the good Nightmare on Elm Street films. And this is, again, a distant cousin of one. And I think it still does a great job of just digging deeper into the story of the Grabber, digging deeper into the story of his family. And I think that's the most engaging part of this film, is that along with the deep dive into these characters, I think you get a more fleshed out story. You get to understand the Grabber's actions even more from part one once you get to see this movie. And I know that is something a lot of horror movie fans don't like, is when you overly explain what the killer is doing and it can really take you out of it. But here, because of the way the Grabber was done in the first Black Phone, I think this does a really good job of just giving you the full circle, the rounded story of this character. And I think if you like part one, you'll definitely enjoy this. If you're a fan of Nightmare on Elm Street, I think you will appreciate some of the liberties that are taken with Black Phone 2. But check it out. Let us know what you think. This has been another JVS movie review. Peace, people.